Today, Open Source Security is talking to William Woodruff, open source security person. William is here because I talked to Endor Labs a couple episodes ago about some TJ Actions, GitHub Actions shenanigans. And William reached out and was like, hey, I have a project that is basically like a GitHub Actions linter. And I'm like, holy crap, we have to talk. So William, welcome, man.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
All right, so I want to start. I'm going to have you explain what Zizmor is, which is the name of your project. But I just must start, like, when I go to your website, there's like a nice little rainbow as your in the name, and it just makes me happy every time I look at it. So well done. And this is not a happy topic necessarily.
Yeah,
when
it's a very sad topic.
Okay, so I will let you kind of start us out. Like, explain your project Zizmor, explain like kind of what you're doing. We'll talk about like GitHub Actions and the tire fire they are, and we'll just see where we go.
Yeah, I guess I can start out by saying so the rainbow it's actually a reference to something. So Zizmor, New York locals tend to recognize it. There was this guy, Dr. Zizmor, who used to spam New York City's subways with these advertisements, which were these like really tacky Photoshop ads, and they had like rainbows all over them.
Nice.
And then it would say, "Now you could have beautiful, clear skin. Come to Dr. Zizmor."
Oh,
and so,
nice.
The entire thing is an homage to this man who took up a lot of my mental space as a kid when I rode the subway.
Excellent.
Yeah. So I guess the background with Zizmor is it's a linter for GitHub Actions is a great way to put it. It's this static analysis tool that I built probably about 6 or 7 months ago at this point. The origin behind it is that I've been one of the maintainers of Homebrew for a long time. So Homebrew, as a lot of people know, publishes tons of packages. Millions of people depend on it for their Mac OS, but also Linux installs. And a huge part of that is this complicated, massive CI infrastructure that we've built up over the years. And parts of that were originally within a custom Jenkins setup. But over the years, we've moved pretty much all of it into GitHub Actions. And so over the years, we've also gotten reports as vulnerabilities have been found in it and as new classes of vulnerabilities have come out for GitHub Actions. And this basically keeps happening over and over again. Like every year or so, we get a big thing of these where a bunch of stuff comes out. And I and the other security person, Patrick, who does a fantastic job, have to go through them and sort of figure out what actually is an issue and what isn't. And so I got to thinking, like, well, this is, as any all good engineers are lazy, and the right thing to do is automate away your problem. And so this more came out of sort of that desire to automate away Homebrew's CI/CD security was.
Oh, that's really cool. I had no idea that's what the history of this was. Awesome.
Yeah, that's the origin.
Oh, that's so good. I mean, solve a problem, man. I love it. Okay, so let's talk about what the tool does before we go on to GitHub Actions specifically, because I pull up, I've never heard of your tool. You send me the message, I look at your tool, and the first thing I do is think, how many things can you really check against a GitHub action? And you have a page here. What do you name it? It's your audit rules. I'll put a link to all this stuff in the show notes. And I started scrolling through it, and I was like appalled by the number of things that you can already check for.
Yeah.
And so let's kind of talk about that. What's the intent? I run this tool against what, and what does it look for, and then what does it do?
Yeah, so there's quite a bit in there already. So I think currently we have about 24 rules, and then in the issue tracker, there's already ideas for about 10 more. And so
nice.
This is growing by basically 1 or 2 more rules per release. I've been trying to do a release every other week or so. So I mean, the overall theme of the tool, I would say, is the tool has 3 categories of rules. There are default rules, there are pedantic rules, and then there are auditor rules. And the idea is that you can basically configure the tool to match your posture and the things you're trying to accomplish. And so most people want, if you're like me, you just want to run something in your CI/CD that then checks for things and gives you a little dashboard of things to fix. That's the normal persona. If you're a little bit more stringent, or there are things that you're a little bit less sensitive to false positives, there's a pedantic category, which will give you things that may not necessarily be vulnerabilities or weaknesses per se, but are worth investigating or fixing or looking at. And finally, there's the auditor persona, which is like, I am a security auditor. I'm someone who's paid to do this, or I'm just doing it on behalf of my project. And I am really comfortable with tons of false positives because I want to go through each of them manually and filter down to things that I know actually matter. But at the same time, I want to be given things that these rules are really insensitive, or rather they're really oversensitive. And so they produce a lot of noise. And so And that runs the gamut of all kinds of different things. So we look for sort of traditional supply chain things where you're looking for like dependency confusion or, GitHub Actions as like reusable actions. We look for things where the action is out of date, that sort of thing. But then also more like sort of traditional vulnerability stuff, like, oh, can someone submit a pull request with a title that contains shellcode, and in doing so, inject code into your workflow?
Yeah, and the one that got me was pinning, right? I don't pin any of my dependencies. Well, my actions, I should call them, not dependencies, because, well, I'm lazy. So it's good.
Yeah.
You need that little poke with the stick sometimes. And I will also say, I love that you call these, like, I don't know, settings personas, because that, as soon as I read that, like, it clicked in my head what was going on here of this is, normal paranoid, like ultra paranoid kind of use cases, which is awesome. I've never seen that before, and I think it's the perfect way to do this. So very well done there, sir.
Oh, I appreciate it. I think I can't claim credit for that. I remember seeing some tool, and I wish I could remember which one it was, that used personas to categorize their findings. And I've always thought that was a very intuitive way to categorize things.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I
for sure. And security tools are just notoriously hard all the time. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's kind of start out with GitHub Actions, what they are, and what we do with them. And I'll set the stage with a test repo I have that I created while I was doing some TJ Actions change files research, which we all know had the backdoor, and it was a big to-do and kind of a mess. And I have a very simple action I created that literally runs TJ Actions change files, and then it also runs the SBOM action from the company I work for, Anchor, where it just uses the Sift SBOM scanner to scan like all the crap I installed. Because I was looking at like, what is TJ Actions, like what's getting installed, what's going on, and your tool found 5 problems. I'm like, 2 freaking actions and it found 5 things? Like, holy crap, I suck. And so like, let's set this stage here. Like tell us about kind of the GitHub Action universe and some of the problems. Like why do we need this tool?
Yeah. I think the big underlying context for all of this is that GitHub Actions is the de facto world's, like it's de facto the default CI/CD for much of the world's open source. Everybody's on GitHub, and so everybody defaults to using GitHub Actions. And there are a bunch of design fundamentals within GitHub Actions that I would say are very understandable from like a project or a product delivery perspective, but that lend themselves to security foot guns. And so like, conceptually under the hood, it's a CI/CD run, which means it's arbitrary code as a service. You're running, your scripts, and they're influenced by data, by triggers from the outside world. And one of the early decisions that GitHub made, which I think was a good one, probably from a familiarity perspective, was they took a lot of the familiar parts of like Travis CI, where you have like this YAML definition, and they made GitHub Actions resemble that. And as part of that, they needed to inject data and inputs, and they added this like little template language on top. But because it's a template language, that happens before any sort of like shell parsing or other Lexian or parsing by any other component within your CI/CD. So it's like the quintessential example of code data intermingling in a way that's not detectable and is like a perfect site for injection by an attacker. So that's like classic, just mixture of code and data in a way that is not possible to be teased apart.
Right. And we've seen these attacks where like strangely named tags or just attackers can sneak in shellcode or whatever it is they're trying to do just by manipulating some outside name that then makes its way inside of the action.
Yep. So I think that's one of the real like core fundamentals of GitHub Actions design, which on one level is a very reasonable initial thing for them to have prioritized because of familiarity with Travis, but it's lent itself to these kind of like ongoing security concerns. I think another really important one, which I think I only really grasped this as I was writing Zizmor, but GitHub Actions' fundamental design is a dispatcher built on top of GitHub's much older webhook system. And so under the hood, what GitHub Actions really is an orchestration engine that takes webhook events, which GitHub's system is pumping out constantly from different repos and other sort of event sources. And it syncs those events into this runner, which is basically just a full virtual environment, full virtual machine, the webhook payload, that's the github.event.pull request, yada, 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 JSON blob, and then finally some credentials so that you can interact with the rest of the system. And when you think about it that way, you see it starts to click why all these things, like all these permission issues happen. there's these like privileged webhooks. Like, as a user, you can only register, or rather, let me step back. Things like the push event gets privileged access to your repository because only a privileged person can push to your repository. And so you start to get these like places where there's implicit privilege in the system. And
yeah, which is not something I realized actually when I ran Zizmor. The permissions, like I just was giving the default is all permissions.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know I could restrict these actions to not have full permissions, which is like, that's really cool.
Yeah, it's actually quite scary what the defaults are. And I would say, I mean, like, I sometimes I worry that I'm coming across as like too harsh on GitHub. They've made a series of engineering decisions that I think are justifiable in context. One of the things that they've done, which I think is really cool, is they've actually successfully restricted permissions down more and more over the years. So I think if your repository was created before, I want to say like mid-2023, I might be getting that date wrong, you basically have like global right by default for all your tokens.
Yeah.
But I believe now with repositories created after that date, whatever it is, it's read-only by default, which is a huge sort of default posture change.
Yeah, for sure. And look, I'm okay picking on GitHub a little bit here because I understand there's that whole security versus usability argument that always happens. I know we pretend it doesn't exist, but it totally does. And one of the ways you get people using your stuff is you make it easy to use. Yes. And so I get it. But now I also give them credit for slowly turning the knob up. I also understand you can't just like fling the lever to 10. You gotta work into it. So I get it. It's hard.
Yeah.
But now at the same time, a tool like Zizmor obviously helps us along the way, right?
Yeah. Yeah. My hope is that it's the driving factor for a lot of people. Gets them to do the more secure thing.
Yeah. Well, and that's why you're here, right? Because like as soon as I saw this, I'm like, we got to talk about this. Like the world needs to know. So this is totally one of those, like everyone go tell your friends. So, okay. So anyway, I want to talk about your audit rules page a little bit because when I looked at this, I was very impressed. So you've got a list of all your checks, all the things you're doing, right? Which obviously makes sense. But the thing I love is you have remediation guidance in here. And I think one of the things that drives me crazy, especially about security tools, is they're like, oh, we found a bunch of stuff wrong. And then what, security tool? So I'm curious about this. Like, how hard is it? Like tell us your experience of like building remediation guidance into this. Cause I also know that like understanding how to remediate, it's easy to find a problem. It is hard to fix a problem.
Yes. Yeah. I'll say, at least for the initial rules that I've implemented, as well as I've had a lot of really great third-party contributors who've implemented rules. The initial rules that have come in so far tend to have pretty straightforward remediations. One of the nice things about CI/CD systems in general is they're pretty constrained. Like, it's not fully arbitrary code. It's like code that's been structured as YAML. And so you have a lot of control over the syntax and where things are and then sort of the flow of things. And so, for example, just taking like an arbitrary one, there's an audit that does known vulnerable actions. And all it does, it tells you if there's a security advisory for an action that you're currently using. And the remediation there is really trivial. It's just don't use that action or upgrade to a hash or a pin of that action that is newer than the advisory broadcasts. Or things like template injections. The remediation is universally to intermediate your template via an environment variable instead, so the shell can lex it correctly.
Yeah, so I saw that one. You have a trophy case page, which I also really like a lot. And the first one, let me open the link because I can't even remember. Oh, it was the Adafruit, which was for CircuitPython. And that's the one of the findings was the whole like environment variable template injection. I'm like, I had no idea, like, and they clearly didn't know either because they had made the mistake. So explain this one to us. Like, what does that mean? Because it feels very counterintuitive, even though I've read it honestly.
Yeah, this one I also find this one counterintuitive, and I think I've been going back and forth on how to explain this one. The basic version of it is that there's two layers of syntax in GitHub Actions. There is, the code that you write inside your workflow, things like Bash or Python or whatever you put inside your steps. Then there's also this higher level expression layer, which GitHub orchestrates via the action runner itself. And so when you go from your workflow definition to a thing that's actually running on a runner after a trigger, GitHub takes those expressions, it evaluates them, and then it splats those values directly into whatever context you've introduced them into. And so, for example, if you have a run block that has, echo some expression syntax, that gets splatted directly into that without any prior parsing by the shell itself. So the shell is just left to parse whatever value is directly evaluated. And the only way to really tell these layers of syntax or evaluation apart is GitHub uses that special little double bracket syntax, or double curly bracket syntax rather, for its expressions versus like a bash expression, which is the standard $ variable or $curly variable. And something that I realized, I gave a talk on Zizmor at FOSDEM a couple of months ago, and I realized that a ton of people find this really confusing because the syntax that GitHub chose for expressions looks a lot like Jinja, and it looks a lot like other template languages, but they added the $ at the front. So I think what people think is that it's a special case of bash that's happening, which means there is no injection risk because bash would do the interpolation correctly. But in reality, it's an entirely different thing that happens before bash has the chance to basically plug the hole.
I mean, that makes sense now that you say it. And okay, so that makes sense now too, because in the Adafruit issue, someone says, thank you, Dr. Zizmor.
Yes.
So I get that now. I was like, who the hell is Dr. Zizmor? Like, I don't understand this. Okay, that's funny. That's funny. Okay. All right. So, oh man, there's like, I feel like I could ask you questions for literally hours about all of this because it is, it's just so cool. Okay. So let's give some like actionable, useful guidance to anyone who's listening. Like, how do we get started with this? Like, what do we do? How do we make it happen?
Yeah. So in terms of using Zizmor itself, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'd say by far the easiest way to use it. So to take a step back, it's been designed to work offline as well. That's a key function of it, is that you do not need a network connection to use Zizmor, and you won't get all the rules, but you'll get about 85% of them, if I remember correctly. But if for anybody who's interested in integrating it into their CI/CD system or local system, there is a usage page that includes an integration section, and under that section we have pretty much drag and drop workflow examples for how to put Zizmor into GitHub Actions. So there are two nice ways to use it. One is the default, which I tend to encourage. Zizmor has a Serif output mode, and Serif is this JSON static analysis interchange format that Microsoft standardized a couple of years ago. Zizmor can dump that format, and then GitHub or any other system that knows how to consume Serif can take that blob and turn it into like a nice render of findings, including backlinks to issues and full descriptions, and gives you like a UI where you could do stateful things like dismiss findings or suppress findings for now or filter by severity, etc. So for anybody who wants to really easily integrate it, what I would recommend is pretty much just copy paste the workflow that we give in the usage documents, and you'll find when you click on like the security tab for your repo, Zizmor will just be there, and you can triage from there. But for anybody who's using it locally, you can do pipx install or uv install Zizmor, and then just Zizmor dot, and that'll audit your current directory. It's designed to be very fast. Should run in under 100 milliseconds.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I did. Well, I used the cargo.
Yeah, you can do that. It's also on cargo.
Right. And I think that's what was in your quick start. I can't remember now where I found that, but somewhere.
It's probably there too. Yep.
One of the things I read. And yeah, you just run it locally and it spits out just nice human content if you run it versus, because I mean, this is one of the challenges, right? You have when you're trying to integrate a tool like this into your CIs. If you just throw it in there, you're going to have this dumpster fire of results. Yes. Because there's a whole bunch of stuff you never even, I learned a lot just by running the tool one time against my test action, and I'm like, holy cow, I need to run this against like some work stuff now. But I'm afraid to also, because I know there's many hours of work on the other side of that run, and that's okay. But yeah, I like the human aspect of like run it. I can fix things, myself as I go, and then turn on the CI. And I actually didn't realize. So I saw the Serif output, but I didn't put together that GitHub automatically like does pretty things with Serif output from tools, which is actually really like. Tell us what that means, because I suspect most people don't understand what is going to happen if your tool spits out Serif.
Yeah. So there's this really nice feature within GitHub called Advanced Security, which I believe it's definitely free for open source repositories. Yeah. And then for enterprises, I believe you pay a fee for it. But essentially the way it works is that if your tool produces Serif, there's another step you can add to your workflow that I believe is like GitHub/CodeQL action/upload Serif or something like that. That will take the Serif JSON, upload it to their black box, and their black box will populate a security tab on your repository, which has like basically, it's like a database view. It's like, here are your findings categorized by ID, by severity, by confidence, by rule ID, etc. So it's just a stateful way to triage findings.
Yeah, and lots of static analysis tools spit out Serif. Like it's
yes.
not.
It's a lingua franca for these things, which is really fantastic. Yeah.
I think Oasis is the guiding standard behind it now. But oh man, that's so cool. Like that's another one of those things that's just like it. Like we can kick GitHub a little bit, but stuff like this is very like that's a lot of work. I know Serif is a complicated standard, so it's awesome that they just make it work.
Yeah.
Sweet. Okay. All right. There was I think that's like those are all the big questions I had. I don't want to go too deep, I guess, on this for people, but like I guess the next obvious the way to end the conversation is to just kind of say, okay, so let's say I'm a person that I got Serif. I got Zizmor. I ran Zizmor. I really like what I see. Like, what does the interaction look like between Zizmor, the open source project, and let's say someone who starts as a user and maybe is looking to get more involved into that?
Yeah. So for people who are looking for who want to become contributors, I've been trying to encourage contributors to come in and either even just small documentation changes or bug fixes. There's been quite a few small things where it's like so for example, the template injection audit flags a lot of different contexts as potentially injectable, but a lot of them in fact are not exploitable because they contain like they only extend to numbers and numbers aren't.
Actually, I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second quick because you just reminded me. You have the ability to mark things as like false positives when this is run for people concerned.
Yes, via advanced security. Yes, that's a false positive thing you could do.
Right. Which is important because if something isn't a hit, and although you also mention like report it as a bug, right?
Yes, please do. Yeah, okay, I want to say to people like, I've been trying to make it very easy for people to report bugs because there are going to be some. It's still a pretty new project, and especially with really like high sensitivity things like the template injection audit. Yeah, there's definitely going to be cases where it flags a context which is not exploitable, and so I want people to report those so that I can allow list them.
Yeah, for sure. All right, I'm sorry for interrupting, but I felt like that feels important because I know as a person who runs and even builds security tools, like false positives are the bane of our existence. Like there's nothing more infuriating than false positives.
Yeah. And the goal is so far is to limit those to the higher sensitivity personas.
For sure. Okay, back to getting involved.
Yeah. But yeah, so in terms of getting involved, so I've actually had probably at least a dozen contributors at this point come to me with patches, and including some really, really, really impressive patches, like new audits, very, very high quality tests, documentation improvements. There's a page on the Zizmor website as well, which has hacking rules for how to get involved in it. And the nice thing about it is it's, I'll drop like the Rust card, like it's written in pure Rust. All you have to do is run cargo build. It's really easy to get started with if you're even a little bit familiar with Rust. And if you're not, I'm more than happy to help walk people through sort of like the getting used to it and learning the ropes. And there's a bit of guidance as well in the docs on how to write new audit rules. Those are actually pretty easy to write, and I'm pretty happy with the API we've settled on for that.
Nice. Well, and you've got, update the trophy case, right? Like that's okay. So I'm curious about that one. So how do you get the trophy? Like, how do you learn of Zizmor triggering? Is it because people are just like doing the, at Zizmor type thing or adding you or someone, or are you seeking out projects to run this against, or what's the story there?
Yeah. So the number one is people adding Zizmor or adding me or, sometimes. So in a few cases, there's been large companies or large organizations that I know have been using Zizmor to burn down a backlog. And so I just have been following that org for a couple of days, and I'll just check in and see what they've been doing and add those things to my list. Nice. I've had a lot of people in orgs send me their trophies for me to integrate because they want to see their little icon in the checklist. And then last but not least, I will sometimes I'll just use GitHub's code search and go PR is open, title is Zizmor, nice, and then sort by recent. And then if it's something that I think is, that's really cool, people should learn from that, I'll include it in the list.
Awesome. Well, in all seriousness, I also like this, especially for a tool like Zizmor, which I don't know if I've ever seen this before, but just reading the bug reports in your trophy case, I learned a ton about what the tool does and even why not to do certain things, because people will say like, why should I do this? I don't understand. And I mean, that is also one of the challenges though, because you're dealing with potentially extremely complicated problems and you have to have a way to convey to people like, this is why we have to do this.
Yeah. And people, it's very understandable. People have the same conversation over and over again where they reasonably are confused by template stuff, or they're confused by why are tags in fact immutable, not immutable, things like that. Like, you know, if I was a engineer who simply did not know as much about CI/CD, I had other expertise, I would probably think the tags were immutable and then be very surprised when I learned the tags are.
Wait, whoa, tags aren't, I did not know that. Hold on. Tags are not immutable?
Correct. Tags are immutable. Yes.
Oh, I had no idea.
Yeah. That's how the TJ actions were. Sorry. I might have to be fact checked on this. This has been a vector before. I'm not sure if it happened with TJ actions, but
I believe it was. Yeah. Because they had, in fact, they pointed the tag at an invalid commit, so it wasn't in the history even. Yeah. Which is also part of the weirdness of that attack. Oh, you're right.
Yeah. This is the really scary thing about the tag stuff is that not only are they mutable, but GitHub encourages people to use mutable tags for actions, because that's how you get like the magic feature where you do at v4 and it upgrades under the hood for you. Right.
Like the Docker latest, right?
Exactly.
Where everyone, as a lazy person, I love, but from a support perspective, is the worst thing ever.
Yeah. It's actually, if I'm going to drag GitHub about one thing, simply giving me a checkbox where I can say disable mutable tags on my repo would be really, really nice. Because you could disable them by rules, and you can do all these branch protection things and type protection things, but I want a single checkbox that is absolutely under no circumstance ever let my tags be overridden.
Right. Yeah, because I mean, man, I can't think of a single instance where I've ever needed that. Nothing good, at least.
Yeah. Well, going back to Homebrew, we see it all the time with projects. We'll do a release, and they'll mess up a little bit, and they'll go like, "Oh, quick! Before anybody notices, let's just force push the tag."
That's true.
But we notice.
Yeah, I suppose. Right. Yeah, I've been there before.
Yeah, I've done it too. I mean, I don't blame them.
Yeah. That's fair.
But yeah, you give people a tool and they use it. I mean, that's how it works.
Well, and especially when we have to like hide the body, like.
Yeah.
I don't want anyone to see how dumb I am. It's like, it always amuses me when I have to do something in the shell, like during a meeting, and you pull your screen up and it's like you forget how to type and you look like a moron.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right, William, this is so cool. I'm so excited to take this tool and like run with it everywhere I can. So let's just close the show with, I'll give you the floor. Like, tell us what you think we need to know. Tell us what you think we need to do. I'll put all the links in the show notes. Like, don't worry about trying to spell links out or anything like that. But yeah, like fill us with knowledge, man. Close it out.
Yeah. I mean, so I think so. An overriding value of mine when it comes to security tooling is it should be the secure thing should always be the default. And I think, this has been said so many times in so many different forms over and over, but the goal with Zizmor really is like, you should be able to install and run Zizmor dot for the current directory and get what is overwhelmingly a reasonable set of advisories and guidance for putting your workflows into a secure state. The goal going forwards is to basically continue to grow the rule set, continue to accept both contributions as well as my own ideas for new rules and refinements to the existing ones. But also I've gotten a lot of really interesting ideas and feedback from people outside of the GitHub ecosystem. Like the reality is that GitHub it's the dominant player right now, but there's also a lot of other CI/CD providers out there, including for-profit ones that are their own service, but also GitLab has their CI/CD offering, and Azure DevOps still exists, and then all these other ones. And they all have that same, not heritage, but influence from Travis, where they're all YAML-based or similar, like structured metadata as code approaches. And so they all have sort of similar fundamental problems. And so one of my goals over the long term is to extend Zizmor to support some of those as well. So yeah, I would love it if it could support, for example, GitLab CI/CD, because I think there are just as bad, if not worse, problems in every single one of these CI/CD systems.
Of course, obviously. All right, so before we go, just because I can, what is the next audit rule you're working on?
Yeah. I would actually have to like go and check, but I think
you can make one up too. It's fine.
No. Let me pull it up real quick and get it. So there's a couple ideas that I had that people have discussed. So Well, yeah, this is one that I want to do that I think, oh, well, maybe someone will contribute, which would be awesome. But a really common thing you see with GitHub Actions is like YOLO installs. Like you'll see someone just do like wget
Oh yeah.
github.com/org repo/latest/latest/foo_amd64.deb, and then tpackage install it.
Yeah.
Those I want to detect and flag, because at the very least you probably shouldn't be doing /latest. You should probably be tagging it. But also more generally, like the correct way to do this is to put it in your apt and like mark it somewhere, and
Yes.
ideally go through standard packaging flows so that the standard tools for like dependency tracking catch these things.
Right.
Instead of YOLOing it into your runner.
I love that.
Yeah.
YOLO installs. So good.
Yeah, exactly. So I want to catch those and flag at least a subset of those for fixes. And then I guess a bigger thing, which is not an audit, but a big feature that I've wanted to do, people have asked for this a lot, is right now Zizmor is limited in terms of what it analyzes. It analyzes the repository slug you give it, or it analyzes the directory you give it.
Yeah.
But some people want like recursive behavior where it like goes through every action, and then goes into that action and gets that actions and all the way down to the to the leaves. And so that would catch a lot of things, I think, because nobody's really looking at that layer yet,
right,
in this system.
Oh my goodness. So, I can imagine that report.
Yes. It would be nasty, I think.
That's good, but that's okay. Like, this is how we start this stuff, Yeah. I'm okay with that. William, I want to thank you. This has been such a cool conversation. There's a thing I always tell people, which is there are conversations I have that it feels like we've been talking for 5 minutes or less, and this is one of those. And that's when I always know it's going to be a good show when that happens. So I appreciate it. And you'll have to come back someday and let us, once you add all your features and we got some more cool stuff. But this is awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure getting to talk.